The bar was quiet, golden lights glowing softly, until Helena, a powerful CEO, sat trembling, unaware of the danger creeping her way. Mickelson, her single dad employee, stepped in, whispering, "You're safe." One moment changed everything, and what she realized the next morning would shock her forever. Type respect if you believe real strength can come from kindness. It was one of those nights when exhaustion didn't just press on Mickelson's shoulders. It lived inside his bones. He pushed open the bar's wooden door with the kind of quiet tiredness only a single father truly understands. The soft rumble of distant chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the warm amber lights offered a rare kind of comfort, the kind he barely remembered. He chose a small wooden table tucked in the corner because corners felt safe, familiar, like the few peaceful minutes he got at the end of long days. He sank into the chair, stretching out his aching fingers, the same hands that cooked breakfast, fixed toys, paid bills, and held his little daughter when nightmares woke her up. He wasn't here to drink away pain. He was here to breathe. Just 1 hour of silence. That was all he ever asked from life. The bar smelled of old whiskey soaked into the wooden counters, a scent that carried stories of people who walked in broken and left a little less heavy. Soft golden lights danced over the polished surface, painting the room in warm shades that made everything feel slower, safer. Mickelson pulled his gray hoodie tighter, simple, worn, honest, like him. He had spent the whole week juggling overdue bills, school projects, client calls, and a cracked kitchen sink that refused to stop leaking. Peace felt like a luxury he had forgotten how to afford. He exhaled, letting the quiet settle into him. And that was when he saw her. Helena, his CEO, 28, brilliant, beautiful, and powerful, the kind of woman who made entire boardrooms fall silent with a single glance. The woman who walked through the office like she carried the whole world in her purse. But tonight, she wasn't that untouchable force. She sat at the opposite end of the bar, shoulders slumped, fingers wrapped loosely around a half-empty glass of bourbon. Her sharp confidence, the one that could cut through chaos, was gone. Her eyeliner looked slightly smudged, as if she had rubbed her eyes too hard. A strand of hair had escaped her bun and curled against her cheek, softening her entire expression. She didn't notice anyone around her. She didn't care. She was whispering something to herself, words that trembled in the dim glow. Mickelson leaned in slightly, not out of nosiness, but because something in her voice sounded broken. "I can't fail. Not again." Those 6 words hit him harder than any punch life had thrown his way, because he recognized that kind of pain instantly, the quiet, hidden, desperate kind. The kind strong people never allow anyone to see. He watched her take another slow sip, her fingers shaking just enough for him to notice. For a moment, the bar seemed to disappear. There was only her, the woman who carried herself like a storm at work, looking so small, so lost, so human. Mickelson felt something tug inside his chest. It wasn't attraction, though she was stunning. It was empathy, the deep kind that comes from surviving too much. He knew this wasn't the Helena the world saw. This was the Helena no one ever got close enough to witness. And without realizing it, Mickelson whispered under his breath, "What happened to you tonight?" He didn't know it yet. But this quiet moment, this single glance across a dimly lit bar, was the beginning of a night that would change both of their lives forever. Helena lifted her glass again, the amber liquid trembling inside it. She swallowed it like someone trying to bury a memory too painful to face. Then she ordered another, and another. Each drink chipped away a little more of her armor. Mickelson watched her from across the room, concern tightening in his chest. He had seen stress, frustration, exhaustion. He worked under her, after all. But he had never seen Helena like this. Never seen her avoid eye contact. Never seen her hands shake. Never seen her drown herself in silence. He stood up slowly, almost reluctantly, as if moving too fast might scare her away. Every step he took toward her felt heavy with uncertainty. Why was she here alone? Who had hurt her? What crack in her strong exterior led to this moment? When he finally reached her table, he softened his voice. "Ma'am, Helena, are you okay?" She didn't even look at him. She blinked at the counter, her gaze unfocused, her thoughts far away from the bar's warm lights. Her voice came out low, irritated, confused. "Why is my employee here?" She finally turned her eyes toward him, but they were glossy, tired, and unfocused. "Go home, Mickelson." For a moment, he almost stepped back. Almost. Because that wasn't dismissal. That was pain disguised as authority, a mask slipping. Before he could answer, the atmosphere around them shifted. He heard footsteps first, slow, confident, unpleasant. Then whispers. "That's her," a man muttered behind him. "She's alone." Mickelson's instincts sharpened like a blade. He turned his head slightly, catching a glimpse of two rough-looking men, unshaven, drunk, and predatory. The kind of men who waited for perfect moments, and helpless victims. Helena didn't notice them. She was staring into her glass like it held the answers she had been running from. But Mickelson noticed. Oh, he noticed everything. The way they scanned her. The silent nod they exchanged. The smirk forming on their lips. His heartbeat slowed, not with fear, but with focus. He stepped forward, placing himself directly between Helena and the approaching danger. His voice dropped to a calm warning. "She's with me. Back off." The men exchanged looks, then laughed. A cruel, ugly sound. "You?" one sneered. "You don't look like her type." Mickelson didn't flinch. He didn't blink. And he didn't move. "I said," he repeated, jaw tightening. "Back off!" Something in his tone shifted the air around them. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was the voice of a father, a protector, a man who had been pushed by life enough to know when to push back. The men's smiles faded. Slowly but unmistakably, their bravado cracked, replaced by uncertainty. They hadn't expected him to stand firm. They hadn't expected anyone to defend her. One of them muttered, "Man, serious?" The other clicked his tongue, annoyed. "Let's go," he grumbled, stepping back. But as they turned away, Mickelson knew this moment wasn't over. Trouble didn't just walk in tonight. It had noticed Helena, and trouble had a habit of returning. He glanced at her again. Her head was now slightly bowed, as if she sensed something had almost happened, but couldn't piece it together. Mickelson swallowed tightly, knowing one truth more clearly than ever. Tonight she wasn't safe. Not alone. Not like this. And for reasons he couldn't explain yet, he wasn't going anywhere. The two men finally drifted away, their footsteps fading into the noisy hum of the bar. But the danger they brought lingered like a cold shadow around the table. Mickelson didn't move until he was sure they were gone. Only then did he let out a slow breath, the kind that carried the weight of fear he refused to show. He turned to Helena. She looked lost. Not weak, no, but shaken in a way that pulled at something deep inside him. Her normally sharp gaze flickered, unfocused, unsure, as though she couldn't understand what had just happened. "You protected me?" she slurred softly, each word fragile, trembling. The question wasn't angry. It wasn't proud. It was astonished, like no one had stepped up for her in a very long time. Mickelson swallowed the tightness in his throat. "Let's get you out of here," he said gently, keeping his voice steady, calm, safe. She tried to stand, but her heel slipped immediately. Her ankle twisted, her balance broke, and she pitched forward with a soft gasp. He caught her before gravity could, one arm around her waist, the other holding her shoulder steady. And suddenly, she was against him. Close, warm, vulnerable. Her forehead rested against his chest, her breath brushing through the fabric of his hoodie. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. She just stayed there, as though her body finally found a place that didn't demand anything from her. "You're safe," he whispered, the words escaping him instinctively. Words he had said many nights to his daughter when she woke from nightmares. But saying them to Helena felt different, heavier, deeper. She lifted her face slightly, eyes half open, as if searching for something he didn't realize he had. A kind of strength she never allowed herself to lean on. For the first time in her powerful, commanding life, the woman who ruled meetings with a steel spine allowed someone else to support her, to catch her, to hold the pieces she always kept hidden. A faint shiver ran through her, and without thinking, her fingers curled weakly into the fabric of his hoodie. Almost like she didn't trust the world enough to stand on her own right now. Almost like she didn't trust herself. Don't let go, she whispered, the words barely audible, soft as a confession. Not a command, not an order, just a plea. A plea that slipped past her defenses and straight into his chest. His grip around her tightened, steady, gentle, certain. I won't, he murmured. And he meant it. He meant it more than he should. Her eyelids fluttered, her breathing slowly syncing with his. For a moment the bar noise faded. The music softened. The chatter blurred. The world shrank until it was just them, standing in the dim golden light like something fragile but impossibly important was forming between them. She leaned further into him, her head finding the exact spot on his chest where his heartbeat was strongest. He didn't move, didn't rush, didn't speak, because he could feel it. Beneath her beauty, beneath her power, beneath all the armor she wore every day, there was a deep, quiet fear she never showed anyone, a fear she could no longer hide from him. And tonight, for reasons he couldn't explain, he vowed silently that she wouldn't face that fear alone. Her fingers tightened one more time in his hoodie, just enough to let him know she trusted him in this moment, just enough to make his heart ache in a way he hadn't felt in years. He didn't let go. He didn't even think about it, because something had already changed between them. Something neither of them could name yet, but both of them felt. A spark, a shift, a connection born from fear, danger, and unexpected comfort. And as he helped her walk toward the exit, her head still resting on his shoulder, Mickelson realized this night was far from over. Mickelson opened the passenger door gently, guiding Helena into the seat like she was something fragile, something breakable, something precious he didn't want the world to bruise any further. She sank into the cushion with a soft sigh, her body giving up the last bit of strength she had been pretending to hold on to all night. He buckled her seatbelt, his fingers brushing the fabric near her shoulder. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the cold night air touch her warm cheeks. When he shut the door and walked around to the driver's side, he could feel the weight of the night pressing on him. The danger, the fear, the closeness, the responsibility he didn't ask for but refused to avoid. The engine hummed softly, headlights stretching across the empty parking lot. Helena leaned her head against the window, watching the blur of streetlights streak past like falling stars. After a long silence, she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost childlike. Why were those men near me? He tightened his grip on the steering wheel before answering. She didn't remember how close the danger had come. Maybe that was a blessing. Because you were too drunk to see danger, he said quietly, honesty lacing every word. She blinked slowly, processing, then turned her head slightly toward him, her cheek resting on the glass. And you saw it from me. Her words drifted, heavy with confusion and something deeper. Why? Mickelson inhaled, the question hitting him harder than he expected. Why did he stand up? Why did he risk himself? Why did he care so much about a woman who never let anyone close? He glanced at her, not as a CEO, not as his boss, but as a woman who had almost been hurt, a woman who hid behind strength every day. Because, he said slowly, I'm not just your employee. Her breath caught quietly. I'm a father. The weight of those words settled in the car like a truth he'd buried deep inside. And fathers don't walk away from people who need help. Her lips parted slightly, not in surprise, but in something gentler, something vulnerable, something she wasn't used to feeling when someone looked at her. Her eyes softened, just for a moment, just enough for him to see the cracks beneath her perfect exterior. A flicker of warmth touched her expression, almost gratitude, almost relief. The streetlights glowed against her skin, revealing the exhaustion she usually hid behind tailored suits and fearless boardroom speeches. Then she whispered, so softly that the dashboard lights barely caught the movement of her lips. I'm so tired of being strong. The words pierced the air, raw, fragile, honest. She wasn't talking about tonight. She was talking about everything. Every expectation, every pressure, every invisible weight she carried alone. For a moment, she looked like a woman who had forgotten how to rest, how to ask for help, how to let someone else protect her. Mickelson didn't know what to say. The confession felt too intimate, too sacred to reply to. So he didn't respond. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer empty comfort. He only held the steering wheel tighter, knuckles whitening. because her words stirred something deep inside him, something he wasn't prepared for, something he was afraid to name. The car was silent, but the silence held connection. Not the kind that came with touch or conversation, but the kind that happened when two lonely souls finally let the walls between them crack a little. Helena breathed slowly, eyes half closed, trusting him in a way she had never trusted anyone at work. And Mickelson drove through the quiet night, protecting her without saying a single word. Because sometimes protection wasn't loud. Sometimes it was simply staying beside someone when they were too tired to stay strong alone. And in that small, quiet moment, their worlds, so different, so distant, so unlikely, shifted closer without either of them realizing how deeply this ride would change everything. The ride to her apartment had been quiet, filled only with her soft breathing and the hum of the engine. But when Mickelson helped her out of the car and steadied her up the short flight of steps, he could feel her trembling, not from the cold, but from something deeper, heavier. He unlocked her door with the key she fumbled out of her purse. The moment they stepped inside, the faint scent of lavender and paperwork hit him. The scent of a woman who lived more in her office than her own home. Helena took 2 unsteady steps forward, then stopped. Her shoulders rose and fell sharply, her breath catching like she was fighting something inside her chest. Then she turned around. Her eyes glistened. Her lips quivered. She reached out and grabbed the sleeve of his hoodie, not hard, not desperate, but trembling, pleading, terrified of something she didn't have words for. "Please," she whispered, voice so fragile he barely recognized it. "Don't leave me alone tonight." He froze. This wasn't the CEO. This wasn't the fearless woman who commanded rooms. This was someone who had been holding the world on her shoulders for too long. And tonight, the weight finally broke her down. "Not like this," she breathed, her fingers clinging to his sleeve. "Not when everything feels heavy." The raw honesty in her voice twisted something inside him. Something protective, gentle, aching. He wanted to step inside. He wanted to stay near her. He wanted to hold her until the shaking stopped. But he couldn't cross that line. Not when she wasn't fully herself. Not when she was vulnerable. So he stayed at the doorway, leaning against the frame, keeping close enough that she could see him, hear him, feel safety because of him. Helena nodded weakly, letting go of his sleeve and walked toward the couch. She sank onto it slowly, exhaustion pulling her down like gravity. Her hair fell over her face as she curled slightly, trying to hold herself together. Mickelson looked around her apartment. Cold, quiet, expensive, lonely. It didn't feel lived in. It felt survived in. He found a blanket draped neatly over a chair, untouched, decorative. But tonight, it wasn't for decoration. He walked over and gently wrapped it around her shoulders, tucking the ends around her like she was something precious. Helena closed her eyes. And for the first time since he'd known her, she looked peaceful. Not strong, not commanding, just human. As she drifted into sleep, her breathing softened, her body relaxing inch by inch, like she finally felt safe enough to rest. He placed a glass of water beside her. Not because she asked, but because he knew she would need it. Then, after a long pause, he knelt down beside the couch. His hand hovered for a moment above her cheek. He wasn't sure if he should, but the loose strand of hair on her face made the decision for him. He gently brushed it behind her ear. Her skin felt warm beneath his fingertips. Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't wake. "You're stronger than you think," he whispered. A truth she didn't know she needed. A truth he had seen in her every day. A truth he prayed she would eventually believe. He stood slowly, taking one last look at her. Wrapped in a blanket he chose. Sleeping in the soft glow of a lamp he turned on so she wouldn't wake up in the dark. Safe because he stayed. And before he stepped out into the quiet hallway, he whispered something only the empty room heard. "You don't have to carry everything alone, not anymore." Then he closed the door gently, leaving her safe, warm, and not nearly as alone as she had been just hours before. Helena woke with a sharp ache pulsing behind her eyes, the kind of headache that came with regrets. The soft morning light spilling through her curtains felt too bright, too exposing, as if it was judging her for everything she couldn't remember. She pressed her fingers to her temples, breathing slowly, trying to steady the sinking feeling in her stomach. Then the night hit her all at once. The crowded bar, the blurred faces, the two men watching her, her hands shaking as she reached for another drink. And then, Mickelson's arms catching her before she fell, warm and protective, grounding her in a world that was spinning too fast. She gasped, covering her mouth. Did she really cling to him? Did she really tell him not to let go? More memories rushed in. The way her head rested on his chest, the quiet strength in his voice whispering that she was safe, the gentleness in the way he guided her to her own couch. A powerful CEO reduced to someone who needed someone. Needed him. "Oh no," she whispered to herself, panic rising. "What did I say? What did I do?" She stood up too fast, nearly stumbling as she paced her living room. Every thought twisted around her heart. Mickelson wasn't just any man. He was her employee, a single father who always stayed respectful, always stayed quiet, always stayed in his place. And she broke down in front of him. The embarrassment was suffocating. The vulnerability terrified her. The memory of how safe he made her feel confused her more than anything. She didn't even finish her coffee. She grabbed her coat and rushed to the office. She arrived earlier than anyone else, something that hadn't happened in years. The building felt colder, emptier, echoing her racing heartbeat. She sat behind her desk, tapping her fingers restlessly, unable to keep still. Every footstep in the hallway made her chest tighten. Every brief silence made her imagine him walking away forever. She kept replaying her own voice in her head, soft, broken, whispering, "Don't leave me." She hated how much it mattered now. Finally, the door opened slightly and she saw him. Mickelson stood there quietly, backpack hanging off one shoulder, eyes lowered as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to look at her after last night. He cleared his throat softly. "Ma'am, good morning." His voice was gentle, cautious, almost afraid of how she might react. Helena swallowed hard, the air suddenly too thick. "Mickelson," she said, barely above a whisper. "Can we talk in my office?" His heart seemed to freeze as he stepped inside, because both of them knew this wasn't just about last night. It was about everything that changed between them. The office felt smaller with the door closed, quiet except for the faint hum of the city beyond the glass walls. Helena stood in front of him, her hands trembling slightly, fingers twisting together as if they held the weight of every mistake she feared she had made. Her eyes met his, wide and honest, carrying a vulnerability he had never seen before. "I remember everything," she said softly, voice cracking at the edges. The words hovered between them, fragile, like a candle flickering in the wind. "I drank too much, and I put myself in danger, and you—" She stopped, swallowing hard, as if the next words could shatter the moment entirely. "You protected me." Her voice grew steadier, yet more raw with emotion. "You treated me like a human being, not a CEO." The words carried a weight Mickelson felt deep in his chest, the kind of weight that made a man sit quietly and truly listen. He nodded slowly, trying to appear calm, though his heart thumped harder than usual. "I just did what anyone should do," he said gently, trying to diffuse the intensity, but also speaking from truth. "No," she whispered, her voice soft but firm, carrying a gravity that made him stop breathing for a moment. "Not anyone, you." The room grew quiet, a silence so deep it felt alive. Time seemed to stretch, every second amplifying the unspoken words lingering in the air between them. Helena's eyes searched his, looking for something beyond what they normally shared, beyond employee and CEO, beyond work and duty. Then she stepped closer. Just a fraction closer, but close enough that the heat from her presence brushed against him, making him acutely aware of every heartbeat. "You saw me weak, and you didn't judge me," she said, her voice barely a whisper now, tremulous yet certain. "That means more than you know." Mickelson looked down, heart tightening as he tried to find the right words. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly, almost unconsciously. She tilted her head slightly, offering a soft, hesitant smile that made something stir deep in him. "Maybe not," she said, voice warmer now, carrying a quiet determination. "But I want to give you something anyway." He lifted his gaze to hers, intrigued, caught somewhere between curiosity and caution. "What's that?" he asked softly. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, eyes glistening with emotion. "A chance," she whispered, almost shyly, yet full of sincerity. "To know me, the real me, not the boss, not the CEO, just Helena." Her words hung in the air like a secret he had been waiting to hear without even knowing it. For a moment, Mickelson didn't speak. He only felt the weight of her honesty and the vulnerability she offered him. The city beyond the office walls continued to hum, oblivious to the fragile intimacy unfolding inside. Helena stepped slightly closer, her presence a gentle insistence, a quiet invitation he couldn't ignore. Her hands, still trembling slightly, were now open, empty, offering trust. I've never let anyone see this side of me," she admitted quietly, voice breaking with the tiniest tremor. "Not anyone, and yet I felt safe with you." He swallowed hard, the sincerity of her confession piercing him more than words ever could. "You are safe," he whispered back almost reflexively, the words carrying more than protection. They carried something more personal, something profound. Her breath caught as she smiled softly, eyes flicking down and then back up, full of warmth and hope. "I want to trust again," she murmured, voice low, almost secretive. "And I want you to know me, all of me." Mickelson's chest tightened, a mixture of awe and emotion flooding him. He felt the weight of her trust pressing gently against his heart, an unspoken bond forming in the stillness. "Then I'll take that chance," he said quietly, stepping a little closer himself, closing some of the invisible distance between them. He felt her exhale softly, relief and anticipation mingling. The moment stretched, delicate and electric, two people standing closer than ever, hearts quietly racing. "I promise," he murmured. "I'll see you, all of you, Helena, and I won't turn away." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mixture of gratitude and something more, a fledgling hope. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely audible yet full of meaning. For the first time in a long time, neither of them was hiding anything. No titles, no roles. Just two people, caught in a moment of vulnerability and trust, feeling something neither expected but both desperately needed. And as the morning sun filtered through the office windows, the walls around them seemed to disappear, leaving only a fragile, beautiful connection, the kind that can change a life forever. A week had passed since that night of fear, vulnerability, and unexpected honesty, and now Mickelson and Helena found themselves back at the same dimly lit bar, the place that had unknowingly held the beginning of their story. This time, however, the tension was gone, replaced with something lighter, warmer, and infinitely more comforting. They sat together at the same corner table, sharing a plate of fries, laughing softly at jokes neither of them could remember making before. The familiar smell of whiskey and fried food mixed with the warmth of the lights overhead. It felt different now, safe, intimate, familiar, like the bar itself had welcomed them back with open arms. Helena watched him as he reached for a fry, then smiled, her lips curving in a way that made his chest tighten. "You saved my life that night," she said, her voice steady, but with a softness that made it feel intimate. Mickelson shook his head, brushing it off with a faint, humble smile. "No, you just needed someone to remind you you're not alone." Her eyes softened as she studied him, really studied him. Not the employee, not the man in her office, but Mickelson, a father, a protector, a man who saw people without judgment. She tilted her head, offering the softest smile he had ever seen in his life, and it made him feel both nervous and alive. "You're different," she said quietly, almost like she was confessing something to herself. "You don't want my money, my power, my position." His hand moved naturally toward hers, bridging the space between them. He took it gently, softly, letting her feel the warmth and sincerity in his touch. "I just want you safe and happy," he said, his voice steady but carrying a quiet, deep emotion. Helena's eyes glistened, but this time not with fear or shame. This time with trust, comfort, and something that felt like hope. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the simple, grounding warmth of him. Sober, present, unhurried. "I think," she whispered, her words barely audible, yet carrying a weight he could feel deep in his chest. "I could fall for a man like you." The words lingered between them, soft, fragile, and yet so powerful that Mickelson felt a warmth spread through him he hadn't felt in years, a hope he thought life had long since stolen from him. He squeezed her hand gently, resting his forehead briefly against her hair. The simplicity of the moment, the quiet laughter, the warmth, the connection, felt more precious than any grandeur or wealth either of them had ever known. He thought about his daughter and how he had always wanted to show her that kindness mattered more than power. And here it was unfolding in front of him, a lesson in humanity, in care, in being present for someone who needed it most. Helena shifted slightly, looking up at him, and smiled again, the kind of smile that could melt walls built over years of independence and control. "You make me feel human," she admitted softly. "Like I can be vulnerable, and it's okay." Mickelson let out a soft chuckle, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've always been strong," he said. "But even the strongest need someone to remind them they're not alone." Her lips curved in a shy, almost embarrassed smile, but there was no shame this time. Only warmth, only trust, only the quiet, steady feeling of being seen for who she really was. He realized in that moment that it wasn't about power or titles or wealth. It was about connection, about moments like this where two very different lives collided and something extraordinary quietly formed. The city hummed beyond the bar's walls, oblivious to the small miracle happening inside. But Mickelson didn't care. He only cared about Helena leaning against him, trusting him with her heart, her fears, her honesty. "I'm glad it's you," she murmured softly, her head resting against his shoulder. "I'm glad you were there when I needed someone the most." His chest swelled with a quiet pride, but more than pride, a deep, protective tenderness. "I'll always be there," he whispered back. "Always?" They sat together in silence for a while, holding hands, smiling, sharing space in a way that spoke louder than words. It was comfortable, it was real, it was theirs. And in that quiet corner of the bar, surrounded by flickering lights and the faint smell of fries and whiskey, they learned something essential. That life wasn't about status or power or money, it was about kindness, and the courage to care for another human being without expectation. And that night, two very different lives finally met in the middle. Helena, the CEO, and Mickelson, the quiet single dad, found something neither of them had realized they were searching for. Hope, trust, warmth, and a love built on truth, respect, and the purest kind of human connection. As they laughed quietly over the last fry and the soft hum of the bar wrapped around them, Mickelson realized he had finally found something life had never promised him. That kindness could change lives, that connection could heal wounds, and that love, quiet, gentle, and real, was worth every risk, every fear, and every lonely night that had led them here.